Nowadays, everything seems to be in 4K, but is 4K actually necessary? In this video, I want to share some thoughts with you that I have about the whole 4K revolution, kind of. 4K is everywhere. New TVs have 4K, laptops have 4K screens, phones can record 4K, everything is 4K. But the thing with 4K, in my opinion, is that it's still pretty much made for a very tiny market that actually needs this kind of quality. And I think it holds some people back to think that they actually need 4K to make something or make a movie, make anything happen. And in my opinion, that is absolutely not true and should not be true. I myself do not film in 4K with my main camera because it doesn't shoot 4K. If I would want to shoot 4K, I would have to buy a new camera and also a new computer because my computer cannot really handle 4K editing. I also owned the GoPro Hero 4 with 4K and now I have the GoPro Hero 5 with 4K, but I actually never really shoot in 4K because the computer just cannot really handle 4K and I don't export in 4K. At least I normally don't. The same thing is true for the drone. I normally shoot in 2.7K because that is the much nicer codec, and the 4K version is just not as good as the 2.7K as long as you want to actually export in something that is lower than 4K. And for me, I still export in 1080p for almost everything. And I also noticed that there are people online who now started slowly to either do their vlogs in 4K or at least do them sometimes in 4K. But even people like Jon Olsson do not export everything in 4K because it's just so much more work and the computer cannot really handle that, and it's so much more time consuming to actually produce this kind of content. But I think if you want to actually push out a lot of content, a lot of videos, maybe even daily vlog or do something on a daily basis with video, speed is of the essence. It is really important that you can export faster and you can also edit your footage nicer and without any rendering in between, because that just consumes so much time. And on top of that, you also have to think about storage. If you have good quality 4K, that eats up a lot of storage on hard drives. Now I know that storage in hard drive is really cheap, and I agree, it is actually really cheap, but the editing computer and the cameras themselves, they are not yet super cheap. And again, if you want to work with 4K and edit in 4K, you want to have a machine that also can handle 4K. Now, if you're in the position to actually, I don't know, have the latest computer or buy the latest computer right now, of course you can edit 4K if you actually want to do that. But if you're still stuck on a camera that doesn't shoot 4K or a computer that cannot really handle 4K, you're pretty much really good with just exporting in 1080p or even just working in 1080p and selecting that kind of quality on your camera. As I mentioned in other videos, on the GoPro, for example, I shoot 2.7K just to be able to kind of zoom in. But then again, on the phone, I tend to use the 1080p, and on my main camera, I also use the 1080p with the 60 frames per second. I think this is really enough. Now, of course, if you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to film something, or you work with a company and you actually have more time to actually make the edit and also the export happen, then if you have the chance, stick with 4K and produce the highest possible quality you can, as long as you have the time for that. But nowadays, I think so much is made for speed, and actually the kind of consumption of the medium is also made for speed. So a video that you put out today may not really be interesting in 3 days or 4 days. So I think the quality loss you get if you export in 180p or just normal full HD is actually something you can work with if you need to be able to work faster and have more content on those platforms. So I think 4K is not necessary yet. It's definitely not something everybody has at home, and even if you have a phone with 4K, nobody really wants to download 4K files with their normal data plan on the go, for example. That is another thing that 4K struggles with, that if you have an internet connection where you have a traffic limit, for example, you don't really want to watch 4K because that is just so much more data if you compare it to a normal full HD movie or maybe just a TV show. So in general, I would say if you have a really high production shoot where you have the time and the money for actually building the best set possible or getting the best gear possible, yeah, go for 4K and make that happen. Maybe even go for a little more than 4K with a RED with a 6K or something. But then you have to consider that you need the same tech on the back end as well. The computer that edits all the footage should be fast enough to actually handle that. But if you actually want to produce faster, maybe even daily, and on the gear you already have, I think 1080p is just enough. And I think you should not go for the highest possible resolution you can in some way make happen. It is just a struggle, and it's not really fun to kind of have your computer blocked for 5 or 6 hours just because you want to export your 10-minute video in 4K. So those are my thoughts on 4K. I don't hate it. I really like the quality of 4K if you have a chance to actually watch it on a proper TV. But I really think that 1080p is a lot for the normal consumption on phones, maybe even just normal laptops. If you consider go to a store and just watch at the computers and the screens being sold, even the normal laptops that are being sold in stores right now, most of them are 1080p and don't have 4K displays. So I think 4K is still for a small market and nothing you should be held back by. Just produce the content you want to produce, and if it's 1080p, people will watch it, and if it's 4K, maybe a couple people who actually specifically search for 4K content will find your video material and then watch that as well. But other than that, I think you're just fine with 1080p. Now, if you found this video in any way interesting, please give it a like, share it with someone who wants to discuss this topic as well, and in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on 4K. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this almost every day, and also check out the playlist that I have in the description below, where I have all kinds of videos about video making and photography gear and all that stuff. I will see you in the next video, and until then, make it your life and enjoy the sun. Bye.